Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we'll be working with my IKEA Nelly Islers. These are the discounted orchids that I purchased and I'm trying to save. Now I showed you in the previous video, I think yesterday in the outro, that one of them is already starting to produce new roots, so they're ready to be repotted. So I thought, well, I'm gonna leave them until Monday to properly film them as well. I don't usually film in the weekend, but here's the funny thing. The same night, I went to my greenhouse to turn on the heater and I took a look at the orchid to see how the root was doing. And behold, what do I see? Not one, not two, but 3 snails munching on the root. And I took some pictures, you should see them on the screen right now. So I put some hydrogen peroxide on the top, killed the snails, but the root was already too damaged. And pretty much that's the story with new orchids. I don't know how it happens, but most of them have the bush snail infestation. And if you're wondering why I waited so long to repot my Nelly Islers, well, I did talk about this in a previous video. I'll link you down below to the video where I purchased them and I explained my intentions more. Needless to say, I'm not going to wait until Monday to do this repotting. I'm going to do it today, and today is Sunday, because these orchids are infested with snails. Now, I am planning to do a community pot. Since these orchids are the same species, they came from the same place, and I kind of care about economy when it comes to space. They will both be potted in the very same pot. Mind you, whenever you pot multiple orchids in the very same pot, you always risk pest and disease transmission. So if you want to do it, you can do it, but know the risks. So with that in mind, let's start the repotting, and the first thing we will do is unpot the orchids. Okay, so for the sake of not being very messy and spread disease and snails and everything around, I usually unpot my orchids above my trash bin. I'm also not gonna use this pot, so I can throw it away. So what I want to do right now is try to remove as much of the medium as possible from the root system. Oh wow, the smell right now. Do you know how apples smell when they go bad? That's exactly how this smells like. So yeah. So let's massage the roots as best as possible and remove the big chunks. P.S. this medium was already moist. So that's one orchid done. We'll tackle this plug a little later with a pair of tweezers. Oh, this medium is a bit different. Seems to have more of that coconut fiber, I think it is. Shredded coconut. Oh wow, we have 2 orchids here. These are not connected. And you know why that happens? Because when they put seedlings from their flasks into pots, sometimes they put 2 or even 3. And because when they repot them, they don't remove the seedling plug. And by the way, this is a different plug. You see, this is coconut fiber. So when they repot them from those plugs to medium, they don't remove the medium. They just pluck out the orchid, put it in a pot, put medium around it, and call it a day. And that's why sometimes you can find 2 or even 3 orchids in one single pot. So this is as much as I want to do at this point. I'm gonna go to the sink and I'm gonna rinse off the root system under the faucet very, very well and try to remove all of the bits of the old medium. So we're gonna come back when we're gonna remove the plugs. Now before that, here's a little something. This is a very, very common sight. You get a new orchid, you unplug it, and you see a massive root system, because this isn't tiny, and you're pretty happy. Well, the problem with this is it's all dead. And the worst thing is you cannot really tell. So maybe you've encountered this. You purchase an orchid, has a great root system, you repot it, and then the roots start to die, the medium starts to smell really bad, it starts to decompose sooner than it should, and you have all sorts of problems. And then you just blame it on repotting. It didn't like repotting and it hated repotting. Well, actually that's not really the case. So a good way to see if the root mass is pretty much dead, 99%, is just take a bunch of the roots and pull. You don't even need to pull much. Do you see this? And do you see what's left on the orchid? Those strings? Well, this is a sign that the roots were already dead, and this is the velamen coming out. No live root should act like that. And mind you, you don't need to press hard and just pull. No, press a little bit, not much, just like that. Pull, and you'll have your answer. So if you have an orchid that does this, chances are 99% of the root system is gone, even though it might look good. So for this reason, I kind of developed a little technique because I was tired of repotting stuff after I just repotted them. What I usually do, I'm not sure if I should do this in case of this orchid because pretty much all the roots are gone, but I will leave a few roots. Pretty much what I do is cut away all the roots coming from the oldest pseudobulbs. So let's take a look at this orchid. These are 2 orchids. I definitely cut away the roots coming from this bulb, and if this bulb would have had roots, which it doesn't sadly, they were munched off by snails, in case this new growth would have had roots, I would cut away the roots from this bulb and only leave the roots on this one. The logic behind that is that there are higher chances for the roots of this growth to be in better condition and to be alive because they're just fresh. They didn't really have all that much time to get attacked. Sometimes, it's not always the case. So after I cut away the roots from this one and this one, I check the roots of this pseudo bulb if it has any roots, and if they're okay, I just leave them. If they're all gone, then pretty much we're gonna have a orchid without roots. And in this case, you can see this is a new growth. I would go behind and I would cut away the roots coming from this pseudo bulb, but since my orchid doesn't really have roots on the new growth, they were munched, I will leave the roots here. And how do I determine which roots come from where in this massive ball? Well, you kind of need to take a close look and pretty much make divisions of the roots. Let's see, these roots, these are coming from this pseudo bulb. See them? Part of them are coming from the other one as well. If you pay attention and give a little bit of time, you're gonna kind of figure it out. So pretty much that's my technique that I developed over the years. If you find it has any sense, then consider it a tip. If not, don't worry, you don't need to cut anything. I'm sure in time you'll find your own technique and do things your way. I even heard of somebody unpotting orchids and leaving them bare rooted for a week or two and watering them, because in that way you can see which roots green up, which one don't, so you know exactly which root is dead. That's a technique as well. If it's comfortable for you, that's another tip. Leave it bare rooted in a jar for a while, and this way you will see which roots will die anyway, which roots will remain alive and are healthy, and so on. So after a week or two you can cut away the dead roots or the sick roots, leave only the healthy roots, and then you can proceed to repotting. So that's the little side note I wanted to add. I'm gonna go ahead and do this orchid as well, and I'll come back for that plug. Okay, now sadly we ended up with 3 orchids. One had 2 orchids in the same pot, as I told you earlier, and the other one, well, the back bulb just came apart together with the plug. But in case the plug would have still been attached to the plant, I would just go in with a pair of tweezers with long prongs, and I think this is how you call them, not sure. And just take my time and pinch away all of the medium from around the roots. Or in the case that the plug was only attached to the older bulbs, I would just cut the roots and everything due to what I just told you earlier. Alrighty, so the next step is to eliminate both pathogens and also snails, including their eggs, from these orchids if there are any. So for this reason I'm using hydrogen peroxide 3% bought from the human pharmacy, and I'm just gonna spray in between the bulbs, the entire root system, the base. And P.S. I made a cut in the rhizome to check for fusarium. There is no fusarium here. If you do see a sort of a brown ring, don't worry, that's usually caused by the sheaths of the rhizome. As you can see here, you need to look for purple, either kind of bright purple, either dark purple. So let's continue to spray. Do the same for this. And last orchid, and I'm running out of hydrogen peroxide. So yeah, as I was saying, when you're checking for fusarium, be critical. I mean, not every circle means you have fusarium. It is pretty logical that this sheath will create a brown circle. It can be light brown or darker brown. But when checking for fusarium, do look with a flashlight or even take a picture, see if it's purple. If it's not purple, everything's okay. What can happen though if you spray with hydrogen peroxide is the stem will redden. I'm not sure if it will be the case here. Usually with Cattleyas I got this. The stem would redden a bit because of that little burn that hydrogen peroxide creates. That does not mean you have fusarium. Once again, check for the purple. I'll link you down below to some pictures from an orchid society. You can see very well that purple and that ring. It's a perfect ring. So yeah, try to be as objective as possible. Okay, this is the part that was munched by snails. And I already see a brand new root sprouting here. So this orchid really is ready to start growing. Who knows, maybe these orchids will actually do okay. Okay, so first let's pot the orchids and then we're gonna stabilize them. A little side note on the subject though. There are some people or even articles who suggest that you do leave some roots behind, even if they're dead, for the purpose of anchoring the plant. Now, that statement is not wrong. They will anchor the plant and make it a little bit more stable inside the medium. That's the purpose of the roots. Even if they're dead, they're still there. They will kinda anchor the orchid. Well, actually, the medium that you put on top of those dead roots will keep the orchid stable. But before you go ahead and celebrate, you kinda need to know all the details. So being that the roots are organic, they will decompose. That can be sooner or later, and that of course will depend on the quantity of roots you leave behind. And I'm not only referring to the velamen, I'm also referring to those little strings, given the velamen does decompose much faster than those strings, but in the end, everything that once lived and lives no more shall decompose. So when you leave behind dead roots purposely, you are also purposely speeding up the decomposition of your fresh new medium. The more organics decomposing you have, the more food for the bacteria, so the population of bacteria will grow in accordance to the quantity of food offered. When you have more bacteria and bacterial activity, the medium will tend to spoil faster as well, since they will start to attack the medium as well. By leaving dead roots in a pot, you will maintain it more wet than usual, because roots tend to act like a sponge, even if they're dead. And the best environment for decomposition bacteria and other microorganisms to do their job is moisture. Therefore, it's pretty much a chain reaction. So before you go ahead and stabilize the plant with its dead roots, take this into account as well. And if you're okay with the repotting sooner than you should, then everything is fine. But if you didn't know about this, well, now you know, you can take a better decision. For me, bioload in my pots is never a good idea, because the whole point of inorganic medium is to not repot that often. And with so many solutions of actually stabilizing orchids in the pot, I find it simply strange to use the dead roots as anchoring systems, starting with bamboo skewers, which are very cheap, to flower stakes and even rhizome clips. The possibilities of staking and stabilizing plants are endless. So I don't need a bunch of dead roots in my medium. So as I was saying, I will try to pot all of these orchids in the same pot. And I kind of need to think about where new growths will sprout, so I know how to position my orchids and how to center them. Now, I have an option. I have the option to put them all facing one side so the new growth has space, or I have the option to put them in a sort of a circle so new growth has space on all sides. And I think this is what I'm gonna do, because you know, sometimes orchids have a mind of their own, and when you think a new growth will sprout from one direction, it goes ahead and does the opposite. Okay, so now that I got that figured out, each orchid shall be stabilized separately by the use of a bamboo skewer. So first I fill my pot halfway with medium, and after I stabilize my orchids, I'll fill it up. I'm gonna use these sort of twisty ties. It just makes life easier, and afterwards I'm just gonna remove them because I don't like them, but they will do the job for now, and they're gonna do it pretty fast. The stake will also be stable when you add more medium, but there we go. This is a pretty extraordinary situation. Okay, so at this point I can start to fill up the pot with medium, and moreover, raise the orchids as much as I need to while placing in the medium. This is the easiest technique that I found when repotting awkward orchids. Okay, we are back and my orchid is now potted. Underneath I have a combination between leca and ceramis, the big chunks, and on top a layer of just leca. Now, there are a few reasons for that. First of all, algae doesn't really develop on leca. It simply doesn't stay moist enough for the algae to have a good life. Therefore, I am trying to prevent the apparition of algae. Second, leca has a lower chance of actually retaining salts, because it has a smoother surface. Ceramis is more porous, so you have greater chances of having salt accumulations on top on ceramis than on leca. Not to mention, in certain climates, not all of them, ceramis will tend to mold on top because it stays so wet. Leca not staying so wet, it doesn't really mold all that fast. Now the downside is, well, leca doesn't stay all that wet, and for new roots is not necessarily the best thing. But there are a few other reasons why leca is good on top, particularly for this orchid. So first of all, the layer of leca is really not big, and you can also see the ceramis poking through. This is an indication for me to see when the medium is dry, because leca doesn't really tell me that. So I need a few tricks to see exactly how wet the medium is, apart from the orchid telling me and the pot looking different. But because it doesn't stay all that soggy wet, it doesn't actually promote bacterial and fungal activity. And you might have noticed that I didn't put cinnamon on those cut wounds. Well, because the cut wounds are inside the pot, they're not somewhere up top, there is a chance that when I water, that cinnamon will just go into the pot, get trapped somewhere, and what it will do is just desiccate new roots if it hits them or if it spreads around, and that's not something good. Yes, cinnamon is good at drying up stuff, but use it incorrectly and you're gonna do more harm than good. Now, I did spray thoroughly with hydrogen peroxide 3%, and that theoretically should take care of most pathogens. But also, since the leca is just so airy, I make sure that that rhizome doesn't stay in a high soggy environment for long. So leca actually gives me more chances for that rhizome to dry up faster. And that's pretty much my thought process and why this is actually good for the orchid. There is humidity both from the clay pot and both from the ceramics underneath, and as I was saying, the layer of silica is really not that thick. It's not like this. So in my opinion, this is pretty okay for this orchid. Alrighty guys, so this was the video. I shall keep you up to date with the evolution of this Nelly Isler. I have 2 more Nelly Islers in case this one fails. Keep in mind, Nelly Islers are finicky orchids. If you lose a few, hey, I did too. Most of us do. It's just that type of orchid, and it really depends how it looks like when you purchase it. And mine didn't look all that well. Purchased it from IKEA. Down below you have the link of the initial video. So alrighty guys, thank you for watching. Hope you found this useful. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for daily orchids and plants videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye! It's so incredibly nice and warm outside today. It's just like spring, and I think my orchids are feeling it. I noticed a dramatic decrease in growth over this winter. Even though it wasn't a very cold winter, the short days took their toll, but now things are looking kind of warm, kind of bright. The day is a little longer, and I cannot wait for the flower spikes to grow faster.